So today we celebrate the Solemnity of St. George, patron of England. Not much is known about his life other than he was a Roman soldier and a Christian. Now, being a Christian and being a soldier aren't obviously incompatible. However, these two seemingly innocuous facts came into conflict during the Emperor Diocletian's persecution of Christians in his empire. Unfortunately for St. George, he was stationed in the Eastern Roman Empire, where the persecution was fiercest. There, soldiers were obliged to make offerings to the Roman gods, and any Christians who refused were arrested. St. George refused to make the required offerings to the Roman gods, and as a result, he was arrested. However, because he was a member of a well-known family, he was initially offered bribes to convince him to make the prescribed offerings. When that failed, St. George was cruelly and repeatedly tortured and then threatened with death unless he recanted his Christian faith. However, he remained steadfast in that faith and died a martyr's death in Israel in 303 AD. Now, it's fairly clear that St. George never came to this country, England, and that therefore he was chosen as England's patron saint because of the example he set. To some extent, that example might have been viewed at a fairly superficial level. For instance, George was a soldier. Knights were significant figures in the Middle Ages. Therefore, it's not surprising that a Christian military figure would prove popular, both in England and in other parts of Europe, and would therefore be considered a strong candidate for a patron saint. But although St. George was a soldier and doubtless possessed many admirable martial qualities, if we dig a little deeper into his character, it's not hard to find deeper reasons for choosing him as England's patron saint. To do so, it's worth pondering what stops us doing some of the good deeds we might like to undertake. One of the most common reasons is that the obstacles we have to surmount in order to achieve the good we seek, those obstacles can seem far too great to overcome. Perhaps you want to get up earlier in the morning, but you feel exhausted thinking about how tired you'll be if you try. Your perceived exhaustion stops you trying to attain the good you desire. Perhaps you want to learn a new language, but you know learning all the grammar and vocabulary required will drive you to distraction, so you don't bother. Perhaps you want to give up cigarettes, but you know how hard it will be, so you set it aside for the future. I could go on, but what's required in these and plenty of other cases is moral courage. The ability not to let these difficulties prevent one from achieving the good one desires. The ability to press on in the face of adversity and to achieve the good one seeks. Now, St. George possessed moral courage in spades. He refused to give up his faith in the face of the various obstacles put in his way, and he did so even to the point of death. Death as a martyr, the highest expression of moral courage. And when we drill down into St. George's character, that's really the key example he offers to us, and that's why he's a good choice as a patron saint. After all, in today's gospel, Christ is very clear that moral courage will be required of his disciples. The world will hate Christ's followers and persecute them because it did precisely that to Christ. Christ's followers, therefore, will need to be able to surmount the obstacles the world puts forth in their path as they seek to pursue their good, which is following Christ and proclaiming his gospel. Perhaps fundamentally, though, what we learn from St. George is that Christian discipleship will never be easy. True, Christ's victory is won, and Christ uses us as his instruments in what are essentially mopping up operations. Still, he uses us in virtue of our humanity, and it's part of our humanity that we have to persist in the face of opposition, even when that humanity is elevated by grace. There are no easy rides in Christian discipleship. Just ask St. George.